Last tidy on the Keep Below Destructible.
Thank you very much for having me. Once again, going back to the sort of roots of Captain Scarlet, it's such a brutal show. You've got Commander Shaw shouting, saying you can't let him die. You've got Atlanta crying her eyes out, and then you've got him who's like, well, it is what it is.
The artist was Steve Kite. I loved his artwork. It's great seeing how he takes key scenes from an episode. I also like the gunfight in Titanica. Seeing that in Stingray was a nice little highlight.
Captain Scarlet sat with Captain Blue. You'd feel a bit awkward sat next to the guy that's just shot you. Thunderbirds, Crywolf. There, I said it. Nobody likes that episode.
Hello and welcome to Keep and Destroy. This is your host, Adam Luff. This is the Gerry Anderson podcast where I interview the fans and ask what 5 they would like to keep and what 5 they would like to destroy. Picking up where we left off, this is part 2 of Scott Sadler's interview.
And now it's time for Scott to begin his destroy list. So what's the first thing that you want to destroy?
So my first one would be Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, codename Europa. I want to like it so much because you've got that fantastic scene at the beginning with Captain Black and a sniper rifle. As soon as you put Captain Black in it, it's sold to me. But then at the end, a Mysteron agent is killed by a piece of tripwire and a normal Spectrum issued pistol. Now, you're going to have to educate me here. Am I under the standing that the Spectrum rifle is the only gun, as quoted, that can kill a Mysteron?
This is the only gun that kills a Mysteron.
I knew we were going to get to that can of worms. That's what Captain Scarlet says, but he's completely wrong because there are many times when a simple bullet can kill a Mysteron. Yeah, the Spectrum gun. Well, that never came back anyway, so I'm going to assume that it was faulty.
I think the episode would make sense if Spectrum Strikes Back wasn't there.
And we were talking about the music as well, and how I mentioned that there was a lot of stock music. Codename Europa was a fine example, actually, because some of the music at the very beginning, it came from Supercar when Captain Black's looking down the scope before he fires. That comes from Precious Cargo. And then when the Mysteron rings go over Professor Carney, and you suddenly get that piece of music, that originated from Supercar's The Runaway Train, but it was also used in Fireball XL5's Sabotage, and then Space 1999's Collision Course as well. That's one of my favourite pieces of music, even though it's not used that often.
It's always nice to see the Captain Brown puppet, I suppose.
True, yes. In fact, he's used as a Mysteron so many times, actually. Codename Europa, the Mysterons.
Yeah, New Survice.
Renegade Rocket.
Let's face it, we wish that Mr. Brown, Captain Brown would have had more airtime anyway.
Even if Captain Brown hadn't been turned into a Mysteron, he wouldn't have lasted long in the show anyway, because he was voiced by Charles Tingwell, who again, like Paul Maxwell, also left the show halfway as well. So I also feel that Codename Europa is one of those episodes that would have worked really well as an hour-long episode, just because of the fact that the Mysteron agent's got 3 targets and he only gets to go after 2 of them before the episode finishes. But in a way, I kind of like the idea that, because sometimes in real life you can work on something and it can still fail while you're working on something. So I like the idea that, you know, the Mysteron agent's got 3 targets, but he gets defeated before he can even get to the final one. So
would you agree with Colonel White's statement of this Mysteron agent is one of the dangerous we've ever faced?
Personally, no. Maybe if the Mysteron agent had actually succeeded in killing Olafsson, then maybe that line would have worked. But no, I don't quite agree with Colonel White. We need more examples of this agent actually doing some serious damage. In regards to the voices of certain characters in Codename Europa, Professor Carney and the security guard who's calling out for Joe at the end of the episode, they have a specific voice actor. Now, a lot of people say it's Neil McCallum, who was the voice of Dr. Breck in Thunderbirds Are Go.
A good theory, Tony. Now explain to me how the exuding rock wrapped itself into a coil.
I don't agree. I actually believe it's Cyril Shaps, who was the voice of Professor Popkiss and Master Spy in Season 2 of Supercar.
Dolmer University? Give me the advanced electronics faculty.
There is great excitement at the station here today as we await the new atomic train's maiden journey.
I'm taking a vacation, starting immediately. Oh, let's say, special research.
And they're off. As she pulls out of the station, the crowds wave and cheer it on its way.
Captain Scarlet, we just picked up a trace on the radar.
What is it?
Something pretty big by the look of it. Shall I send someone to invent?
They sound very similar, and yet there's no evidence to say that it is Cyril Schaps, but as far as I'm concerned, there's been no evidence to say that it's Neil McCallum either. Although I think Neil McCallum did do some voices at the beginning of Captain Scarlet, like he's one of the pilots of the Delta Tango.
Send out a Mayday to London.
I believe that's Neil McCallum in that, and he was also in London Control Tower.
The crew and passengers have vanished.
And he was also in Big Ben Strikes Again.
He's going too fast. He's not going to make that next turn.
But people say that he's also Professor Carney and the security guard in Codename Rover, but no, I believe it's Cyril Schaps.
Thunderbirds, End of the Road. I think it's been regarded as one of the filler episodes where they already filmed it and then they had to stick all the filler in to make it the 50 minutes. And you can tell by the scene with Alan and Tintin, the jealousy over Eddie.
She certainly gets around.
I mean, yes, it's a rescuing Eddie, and it's interesting because obviously the state that they know him, you wonder how they're going to get around that.
I do like when they realise that it's Eddie Houseman they've got to rescue and we don't know what to do. He knows who we are. I love it when Alan says, "Oh, we can't help him then." He's so quick to go to that conclusion, and I think there's probably because of the jealousy. That brings up another point, actually. When Grandma is talking to Tintin about how Alan is sick, and yet he still went on a rescue, and then the scene ends with Tintin going, "Oh, poor Alan," and then we just cut to Alan looking happy as Larry, just a big smile on his face.
Thunderbirds, Lord Parker's Holiday.
I'm not a big fan of season 2 at all, but Lord Parker's Holiday is my favourite episode.
I'm really surprised that it is your favourite when you've got the likes of like Path of Destruction and Atlantic Inferno.
I think it's because I've always liked Penelope and Parker. I've always liked their episodes. And it's a good rescue in itself. And it's a nice showcase for Brains as well.
It just doesn't feature enough action in it for me.
Okay.
I mean, there is other Thunderbirds episodes that has very little action. You know, The Imposters.
Man from MI5, even though that's my favourite.
Man with MI5, yes.
Yeah.
The best scene is when the dish is struck by lightning and it crashes down the mountain. But other than that, I'd always say it's one of the ones to skip.
Even though it's not the same character, but the professor in the episode is the same puppet as Professor Borrender from The Perils of Penelope. Even though as a kid I recognised it was the same puppet.
Oh, you know what? I never have until you've just said.
Oh, right.
Most probably because that's the amount of interest I have in that episode.
Yeah.
I've just never noticed.
I see what you mean, yes. But it's not the same voice actor, though. David Graham was the voice of Professor Borrender, but Peter Diner was the voice of Professor Lundgren. There was a line when he says to Penelope, "I'm sorry we meet again under such tragic circumstances." Now, as a kid, I thought he was referring to The Perils of Penelope because I'd forgotten the name at that point. But it's a shame, actually, that it wasn't Professor Borrender, because that would have been a nice little bit of continuity, even though it's a different voice actor. But still, Parker and Bruno make a good little double act, especially with things like keep the guests occupied because of the disaster that's coming. And then Bruno just goes, "Oh, it'll be a great disaster." Yeah, all right.
All right.
I love that. I just, because he already doesn't like him anyway when he first met him in the rain. "What are you staring at?"
He's like, "Fight the fire.
We've got to keep them occupied so they don't realise the danger. Go and wake them up." Oh, si, senor. The fact that Parker often works as a chauffeur, so he's always been told what to do. I love how he takes advantage of that by just ordering Bruno around. So I thought that was quite nice.
Joe 90, Operation McLean.
No argument here.
I think it's a very boring episode. I like Professor McLean as a character. But this instance where he snaps at him and says, "Oh, what a good idea, Joe. We'll just say that a 9-year-old boy is going to do the operation." Well, isn't that the premise of the show? Like,
well, secrecy, though. I think that was the point of that scene, that they couldn't risk. But then on the other hand, as much as I love Attack of the Tiger, I do admit that is an awkward moment when Sam tells the general that Joe, this kid, is going to be flying a bomber. So Yeah, I won't argue with you there. One thing I do like about Joe 90 is the fact that there's a lot of character-driven episodes, and this is a good example of it. It's not really a high-stakes, world-threatening type of storyline, but it's a good little character moment because a great writer could be dying soon, and also it's someone close to Professor McClane. So I guess there's an emotional stake there.
Yeah, that's nice.
I can agree. For a show that needs to be action-packed, especially for kids, having a slow-paced, character-driven storyline can run the risk of boring its audience. So this is very slow in places, but I do like the twist. When Professor McClane is in the big rat getting the brain patterns, we think that he was getting the brain patterns of Dr. Emil Kados so that he himself would take the operation. And they still hint at it with certain dialogues by saying,
"That's why I had the transference, Joe. Don't you see? With the knowledge that I've now got, they'll have no choice."
But then you reveal that no, Joe's the one that took the doctor's brain patterns and Matt McClane took the brain patterns of a Win agent so that he's good with a gun now. So I think that was a nice twist.
The plane crash with the doctor on itself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was a wasted scene there. You could have had a good action scene with a plane crash on there. The fact that you have a thunder crash and then it just cuts to a newspaper. I mean, obviously, you can't destroy the aircraft fully because he's got to survive, because that's the point of the episode. True.
It's a good cut for shock value, but because of Gerry Anderson's reputation for showing plane crashes and things like that, I agree with you. From an editing standpoint, I like the cut, but it's not what Jerry's known for. But still, there are places where it's really slow, like, setting up the operation and all that stuff. So
yeah.
I can agree with you there.
Stingray Titan goes pop.
I love that episode. It's convince me otherwise.
Stingray's broke throughout the entire episode.
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
It's almost the same sort of storyline as Stand By for Action, and I actually like Stand By for Action.
Yeah, me too.
Duke Dexter's manager is so annoying. It's just, he shouts when he talks. There's no excitement in the ending for me. Titan obviously gets to speak to him at the end, and he just lets him go. And his plan makes no sense whatsoever.
I think because it's more of a comedic episode, I like the fact that Titan is so delusional, the fact that Duke Dexter is actually doing some good for his cause. I think the fact that he's lost so many times, he's just willing to take anything at this point. It's like, yeah, you're making the humans go crazy. I'll buy that. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
So this should have been Titan's final appearance, because it would have been great to have the last episode to feature Titan. He's claiming victory for himself, even though it's not really much of a victory, but he's gone so balmy at this point that he's willing to take this as a victory. I think that would have been a nice way to end his appearance, but of course he did come back for Eastern Eclipse. I suppose I'm kind of on thin ice, really, because I'm talking about how much I like this episode, and yet my most hated episode was Played Again SRAM. You could argue that has some similarities as far as music-based storylines, and I always think that Played Again SRAM is when Terrorhawks jump the shark. Would you say Stingray jumped the shark with Titan Goes Pop?
Absolutely.
I said about how much I hate Played Against Ram is because imagine if Titan himself had become a pop star singing songs about how much he hates the Terranians or whatever. That would have been Stingray jumping the shark. And fortunately, because they still kept it grounded, they still made Titan... He's not much of a threat, but he still has some credibility. How do you feel about the Messenger Boy? The fact that it's the same puppet as the Marineville Traitor?
I've never really noticed it.
All right. One thing that really annoyed me is the fact that Marineville Traitor is episode 20. That same puppet in the same Wasp uniform comes back in episode 25, An Echo of Danger. Why couldn't Echo of Danger be before Marineville Traitor? But he's also the pilot in The Lighthouse Dwellers as well.
One thing that's always confused me as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but why doesn't Troy on Phones by now know that house is X20's house?
Agent X does say to them that the owner has left, so World Security has rented it. So I guess there's that argument. But yeah, because we'd previously had it in Echo of Danger with the psychiatrist for Phones and Stand By for Action with the old man, it is pushing it, yes. And we've come to the end of Scott's Keep and Destroy. So thank you for your list, Scott. It's a great list, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. One thing I was going to say about the boys as well, because there's so many episodes that they've not seen and stuff, I'd love to start like even if only temporary, a podcast with my oldest where like he watches the episode for the first time and gives a child's point of view.
Yeah.
Of what he thinks of the episode and what did he understand it, what do you think of the storyline, what's favorite characters.
Give it a go. Why not? There's nobody's done any reaction videos to Gerry Anderson, certainly not to my knowledge, so go for it.
Since the recording of our interview, Scott has begun his own podcast entitled Stand By for Action. You can find his show on SoundCloud. I'd recommend you give it a listen. He's done a good job. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like and a share and a subscribe. And if you would like to donate to the show, please go to Buy Me a Coffee or GoFundMe. The links are in the description. This is Adam Luff, signing out.
I love Fibre XL5, but I can never get over the oxygen pills.
Yeah. But did it bother you when you was young?
Yes.